Adam and Eve to take special care of the green plants. Green plants are the base of the food chain. And this is why a lot of people look at that passage and say this implies that all life was vegetarian. No, if that was the case, it would simply mention plants. But the focus on green plants is an instruction to Adam and Eve that if you're going to manage the resources of the planet for the benefit of all life, number one priority, take care of the green plants. Because if you don't take care of those, then nobody gets to eat. But then we know what happened. Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve fall into sin. And when they fall into sin, they begin to abuse their environment. And I'll be speaking tomorrow in the response to Williams and Blocher that what happened at the fall was not changes in the laws of physics or change in the universe. It was a change in humanity. The environment became ruined because of us, as the text says. And a part of that ruination is we began to particularly abuse those creatures that God had specially designed to have a powerful affinity with us. This really comes out in Job 39, that one of the things God did with the soulish creatures, the birds and mammals, is He endowed them with a strong desire to have affinity with us. And when we fell into sin, we took advantage of that affinity and began to slaughter them off. Now, God, knowing in advance that Adam and Eve would sin, and knowing in advance the consequences of that sin, do you not think He would prepare the birds and mammals in advance by creating a sequence of bipedal primates over the course of several million years so that step by step these birds and mammals could adapt to the coming future shock of human beings? And this is exactly how I think we can reasonably interpret the sequence of these bipedal primates. Each one was a little more effective than the previous in hunting birds and mammals, and hence these birds and mammals will become progressively better adapted to deal with the predatory activity of the future coming sinful human species. Now, did I draw that from the Bible? Not at all. What the Bible is fairly silent on this issue, and by the way, we'd expect the Bible to be silent on this issue. Notice in terms of the creation content of the Bible, everything has a point of contact with every generation. This is why I believe that the Bible correctly doesn't mention neutrinos. Neutrinos would have no point of contact with people living 3,000 years ago. Likewise, to mention bipedal primates would have no point of contact with any generation but our own. That's why I also take the position that dinosaurs are not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. Some Christians read dinosaurs into Job 40 and 41, but the plain explanation is dinosaurs that have a point of contact only with people living over the last 200 years. And so given that, we would not expect the Bible to address this issue of bipedal primates or to explain why they were created. And so this is something that we're simply reasonably imposing upon the data and saying this is a good explanation for why these creatures do show up when they do in the order that they do. But my argument is from an evolutionary perspective, they have no explanation at all. Now, in terms of who, why, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I've already covered that. Who is Homo sapiens? Something that's very confusing for lay people in the subject of anthropology is the distinction between human beings and Homo sapiens. If you were educated 30 years ago, you were taught that we humans are Homo sapiens. That's not what the scientific literature is saying today. The scientific literature makes a distinction between Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens would include Neanderthals. It would include Homo sapiens ideltu, and by the way, Homo sapiens ideltu lived at about the same time as the Neanderthals, and they're essentially a tropical version of the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals' morphology was very well designed for a cold climate. Homo sapiens ideltu, who had the same intellectual capabilities as Neanderthal, was well adapted for the tropics. But in terms of fossil finds, we don't have that many fossil finds for Homo sapiens ideltu, and there's great dispute over the finds in Israel that date back 90,000 to 100,000 years ago. We simply don't have adequate finds there, and we don't have DNA from either Homo sapiens ideltu or the primitive Homo sapiens that are being found in the neighborhood of Carmel, Israel. but they're not human. And they lived about 70 to 160,000 years ago. Now, in terms of who are these Neanderthals, in the case of the Neanderthals, we do have mitochondrial DNA. Now, the value of mitochondrial DNA is that all of us get our mitochondrial DNA exclusively from our mothers, which makes us an excellent tool for testing theories of creation evolution. In this sense, the only way my mitochondrial DNA can be distinct from my mother's is if I experience a natural mutation in my mitochondrial DNA. Since my father makes no contribution, there's no mixing up of the DNA in reproduction. And therefore, this is an excellent tool for tracing the female lineage of any species. Now, this is a little out of date. I prepared this overhead 2 weeks ago, and in the last 2 weeks, they have found an 11th specimen from which they had recovered mitochondrial DNA. So as of a couple of weeks ago, we now have 11 specimens of Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA. And interestingly, these 11 specimens cover the entire range of the Neanderthals. They range from, say, Spain, France, and Britain, all the way across Europe, towards the Urals, and down into the Caucasus region. And these 11 specimens cover the entire range. They also cover the entire range over the dates for Neanderthal. Neanderthal dates from about 150,000 years ago to about 35 to 38,000 years ago. And as we look at these 11 mitochondrial DNA specimens, what we notice is virtually no diversity. What that tells us is that over those 120,000 years, Neanderthal did not evolve. Now, if Neanderthal is not evolving, how can Neanderthal give rise to another species? And now, where did Neanderthal get its DNA unless it was specially created? Because a previously existing species wouldn't be expected to evolve any more rapidly. But the other thing we notice is that we can compare the mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthals with the mitochondrial DNA for humans. Now, in a significant strip of that mitochondrial DNA, they can find 25 nucleotide sites where the Neanderthals vary with respect to one another. So, we're looking at, thousands of nucleotides, and there's only 25 where Neanderthals show any variation. And we don't see any trend over those 120,000 years. Now, if you look at humans, and with respect to humans, they have samples that go back 40,000 years. And over the last 40,000 years, and when we look at people today all over the world, we can find in that same mitochondrial DNA segment only 8 sites where humans show any diversity. There's only 8 nucleotide sites that vary. Now that demonstrates that over the past 40,000 years, humans have not evolved. So mitochondrial DNA has definitively established that neither Neanderthal has evolved and humans have not evolved. But what's really interesting is these 8 sites where humans show some diversity, none of those 8 overlap any of the 25 where Neanderthal shows diversity. And that definitively proves that Neanderthal made 0 contribution to the human gene pool. So the old textbook story that we evolved from the Neanderthals has now once and for all been put to rest. And this is a consensus amongst the leading geneticists working in the discipline, that Neanderthal can't possibly be the ancestor of humanity or contributed even a tiny amount to human DNA. So, in summary, this mitochondrial DNA proves that humans did not evolve. It also proves that Neanderthals did not evolve. Now, with humans, we don't have any Y chromosome DNA from Neanderthals, but we do have Y chromosome DNA for humans. By the way, there's a reason why we don't get it from the Neanderthals. With the Y chromosome DNA, that's nuclear DNA, and you only get 2 copies per cell. With a mitochondrial DNA, you get 500 to 1,000 copies per cell. So it's a lot easier to reconstruct ancient mitochondrial DNA than it is to construct ancient Y chromosome DNA. and you say, can we go to the other